Hello everyone. Today we'll be talking about joseki once again. Today's joseki is the 3-3 joseki with the jump variation for black. And I feel like this joseki has been very confusing to a lot of people, and it's not so easy to deal with if you don't know the theory. So today I will be talking through all the variations in a very easy to understand way so you can master this joseki. So whenever you encounter your opponent playing this joseki, you'll definitely reach an equal position easily or even gain an advantage. So towards very end, I will present you a trick. So as white, you can play a trick, which is a joseki itself. You'll reach equality for sure, but it's very easy for your opponent to fall for the trick. So today's video is going to be a joseki / trick video. Let's first look at the two cut variation. White pushes, black blocks, and now white cuts on the outside. We'll look at the cut on the inside later. So now at this point, black has to capture the stone. And then white ataris and then captures the corner. So this would be the variation of white plays the double hane and capturing the corner. This is an equal position. As you probably know, this is a very common joseki. Later on, black can extend and still extract some value from the outside using white's corner's weakness. So this is an equal position. Now, white cannot cut inside because this would be a worse variation for white to take because black can simply capture. And the reason this is worse for white is because white cannot ladder the stone on the outside. White has to extend. If you just ladder, black's going to run. And now white is very weak on both sides, and this is not easy for white to deal with. So white has to extend out, after which black can directly make use of the weakness and then jump over here. Now when white attaches, we can connect. White has a very nice sacrifice sequence, but even after this variation, it's true that white got a very nice outside, but there's a peep over here, there's a clamp over here. So white's outside is still quite weak, but black's already gained a significant amount of territory, and black already has 2 stones on the outside. It's still black's sente. So white is very slow, and therefore this is not a good variation for white. So just remember that you cannot cut on the inside. This is what black is hoping you to play in this variation. There's only the outside cut that works. Now, instead of cutting on both sides, if you don't like the variations that I just talked about, what you can do is to actually push on top. This is also another joseki that white can play out, and I personally really like this for white. When black extends, we push and now cut on the outside. This time, black cannot just capture the stone, right? Ideally, black really wants to capture white stone, but if black captures, white is going to atari and then capture the corner. And now, the joseki used to be without these 2 stones as exchanges, but now this exchange obviously is very favorable for white. Actually, this would just... your win rate is probably going to go to 90 plus if you play like this as white. So black cannot accept that, mostly because white has already exchanged the push on top. So when white cuts, black has to connect on the inside. Now at this point, white has a tsuji attaching black stones. Black has to turn down. If black tries to run, white is going to crawl back. Now, these 3 stones are floating in the air, but also the corner is not alive. So this would be a losing position for black. Black has to capture white stone, and white will block on top, and black cannot suffer the atari, therefore he turns. So at this point, white needs to Tanuki. Instead of extending, following our intuition, the extending is too slow. Right now, we have to go ahead and develop on the outside. Okay, so this atari... if black atari is not a big deal, we can just Tanuki, and black is quite slow. So no need to worry about the atari. So remember that the joseki variation is at this point, white just plays on the outside, and then he has a very nice influence over here. Now the third main variation for white, and this is actually very common in the professional world, is for white to immediately play a ladder breaker. Now, if black is not careful and play a responding move, this would be falling into a trap, because now what previously, the variation that previously didn't work, the inner cut now works, because when black captures, white can atari and then ladder stone. And now black cannot run, and this locally is very bad for black, because white will capture next, and black has a very small corner, and white just has the influence towards both sides, and it's a very strong influence that has no weakness. For example, if black plays another ladder breaker, white can just take, or simply play a move that makes sure that this stone is captured. But let's say in the case that white just takes, you can see that even if white suffers a little bit here, white is able to gain a perfect influence. Now, this group, the value of this is way overcompensating for what white is losing over here. So black usually, so here's the main theory. When white plays elsewhere, even if this is not a ladder breaker, let's say, for example, if white just peacefully play a small knight over here, usually what black would do is to not do anything outside but immediately fix the cutting points to prevent all the variations that we have just talked about. So usually black should play like this. And now we can see that black has a very nice corner and there's absolutely no weakness. And eventually, if black is going to come back and press, let's say, for example, black can counterattack through here. So now these three white stones used to be an influence, but now it's kind of under some sort of attack. That's black's main idea. So if you play the jump and white did not immediately follow up locally, you should play the second line Hane. The second line Kosumi to complete your joseki and reach a very perfect corner. So that's the third main variation, because sometimes Go is just a global game, right? So you don't have to play locally. Maybe, we can play, let's say, for example, we have a ladder breaker here and then black decides to fix. Yes, locally it's better for black, but then when we do the double approach, locally it's good for us over here. So it's like weakness for weakness, and then we still reach a equal position like this. And that's just the game of Go. Sometimes you're losing on the left, but you're winning on the right. Eventually, it's still a close game. So far, we have covered the three main variations for white. And it's likely your opponent also knows these variations because he's the one who has chosen to play the jump variation. Now, I'm going to present you a fourth niche variation, and that will be your secret weapon against black's jump. And only you know because you watch my videos. So the fourth variation is for white to Hane on the second line. This is a very tricky variation, and it's actually a joseki, and white can reach equality no matter what. So against this move, the first move that black cannot play, but many of your opponents will actually play, is to play the 2-2 block. And just this move alone, it's like 75-85% of players who would fall into this trap. So already we're gaining an advantage as white because now we can push and cut on the outside. Now, against this push and cut, usually without these two exchanges, black will capture the white stone without hesitation. But now, because of the exchange that we did, black can no longer do that. If black captures, we will Atari and completely capture the two stones. And now we can see this exchange at 2-2 against white stone is so terrible because it makes white so thick and there's no more co-threat. And then black also lost a ton of points. I can conservatively say that black has lost more than 10 points with this exchange alone. So this would be, so for a player who is about to go to professional level, for example, this could be a resigning moment for black, basically. So black cannot Atari on the outside. If he does Atari on the outside, we know why this is such a favorable position for white. So black has to connect to prevent the double Atari. And at this point, even if the ladder doesn't work for us, we can just extend the stone out and that's no problem. Now, black cannot allow us to connect in Sente, and therefore he has to capture the one stone, after which we can play the AI move. Okay, so this is the optimal move, but from a human perspective, you can just play the tiger's mouth. I also recommend this move. It's slightly worse in terms of win rate, but I think this is easier to understand. Now, this makes white's group very strong here, which means that this stone, it's very hard for black to drag out this stone immediately. For example, if black gets out, white can just save the two stones, and then we're not sure what black is going to do. If we extend, I can just follow up, and black is kind of floating in the air, and it's only running these group is only going to increase white's territory on both sides. And now we can also see that black has a very solid corner, but it's quite small. So this is a favorable position for white moving forward. And from a human perspective, this is easier to manage as white as well. And of course, just to briefly talk about the AI variation, when white plays out this move, it's completely capturing black. And this move has a lot of say towards the right side and towards the bottom. That's why AI likes it. And this is the optimal move. Now, if black cuts, which works, white is going to simply just abandon the stone on the second line. When black pushes out, we can just maneuver like this. And this would also be a better position for white because black only gained very limited incremental territory while our stones are all on the outside, and it's having a significant influence towards the center and towards basically towards everywhere on the board. So this is still a better position for white. But if you're not comfortable with AI's variation, as I said, you can just play out this variation. This is very keen on territory. And then it's not easy for black to drag out a stone. This is definitely black falling into a trap. And try it out in your games. And I can tell you there will be so many of your opponents who will fall into this trap. So now we understand the trap. Now let's understand what black can do. The safest variation for black to play is to actually just connect. And this is the simplest variation, preventing any sort of cuts from white. And I really recommend you to play like this as well if you encounter white's aggression. Well, basically the niche variation here. Now, against this move, white's correct move is to play a tiger's mouth. This is a very nice move that makes a very good shape. This group is very flexible and has a lot of ice space, and therefore it's very strong, and then it probably can't be attacked anytime in the future. Now, black just needs to play a 2-space extension here. So AI would also recommend you to play the turn here, but I really don't recommend it because it's harder for human players to manage because white can now pincer, and then black is not completely alive. If you jump out, white can follow up. Now white is building towards the bottom side, and it's not certain what black is doing with this group over here. And later on, this group can be under attack once again. So this is very hard to manage for black. I don't recommend you to play like this. The move I recommend is to play a 2-space extension and just settle. Now black is completely alive, and then white can just Tanuki and play somewhere else. And this is still an equal game for both players. So this is the standard joseki variation that I recommend to my viewers. And I think it's fairly easy to manage regardless of what level you're currently at. Now, another legit choice is for black to Tanuki, but I also don't recommend it as black. Let's see why. If black plays elsewhere, and this is what an AI would have played probably, against this move, black seems to have no follow-up, but white does have follow-ups. Now white can pincer from the outside, and now black is still not alive, and black has to figure out how to deal with this. And then it's not so easy for a human player to deal with this. AI would have no problem, but it's not easy for black to manage this. Like, what do you do as black here? It's not certain. If black harness into the corner, white can use the same variation, push and cut on the outside, forcing black to connect, and now white completely controls the outside, while black still has to live like this. And now white doesn't even have to fix the weakness over here. He can just play elsewhere. And this is just a better game for white because of the outside control that white has. But if black doesn't play the Hani on the 2-2, which is not a good move, I am not sure what black is going to do. Probably get out like this, but still, like, white can just keep attacking, and this is not comfortable for black at all. So the Tanuki is also a legit variation, just to be sure, but there's a very serious follow-up for white that is to pincer, and it's not easy for black to deal with. So you can definitely drag your opponent into a very uncomfortable zone for him, and that's how you gain an advantage early. Because if you go into a game early game where your opponent feels really comfortable. It's a position he has seen many times. It's very hard for him to make a mistake, and therefore it's very hard for you to gain an advantage. And therefore, the idea of us hunting here is to make sure that your opponent is in an uncomfortable situation, and that's where he makes mistakes, and that's how you win the game. Okay, so to quickly recap what we have learned today, we learned a very useful joseki. That's when black jumps here, how to deal with it as white. And we said the first main variation is to simply push and cut on the outside. And then we are going back to the exact same variation as if you were double hunting and capturing the corner. If you like this variation, use it. This is not hard to manage for white, and this is just an equal position. The second variation is for white to push on top. Black extends white push and cut on the outside, and we explained that black cannot capture the stone, so he has to connect on the outside. White has a tsuji. You have to remember this tsuji if you want to follow up. And now we block on the outside. Black cannot suffer the atari, therefore he turns, and this is white's sente. White can play elsewhere, and this is an equal position as well. The third main variation is for white to simply tanuki locally, and this is a very common idea in the game of Go as well. Against this move, black will immediately fix his shape regardless of what's going on the outside. Whether you have a ladder breaker or not, it doesn't matter. This Kosumi move is always the most important move to play early game, because this completely fixes the black shape, and then making this corner strong, meaning that these 3 white stones will be under attack. So to compensate for the local loss, while we'll follow up by approaching black's corner and therefore forming an advantage on the bottom right side, while leaving some weakness on the top left. So therefore, this is still dynamically equal position. And then finally, the highlight of today's video is for you to understand that there is a fourth, not very known variation that is for white to honey into the corner. And the most likely way for your opponent to fall into a trap is to respond to it. Black cannot respond to this because after this, we can push and cut and then extend. After black tries to lift the corner, we can play the tiger's mouth, and now white controls the entire outside. It's not easy for black to drag out the stone. If black tries to drag out, we can leave him hanging in the middle of the air while we take profits on both sides, and this will be very hard to manage for black. And of course, if you like fanciness, you can also try out the AI joseki, AI variation that is for you to play this fancy move and just sacrifice the stone on the second line. This would also be a better position for white. So black should not play the honey here. So if you encounter this as black, the correct variation that I recommend you is to simply connect and fix all the weaknesses. Against this, white will play a tiger's mouth, and after that, we can play a 2-space extension. This is a perfectly equal position for both sides. While black seems to be fast, white is rock solid, and then he can use this wall to build on the right side. Totally equal position. And finally, we said that if black tanukis, it is, in the eye of AI, this is still equal position, but for a human player, after white pincers, it's not easy for black to deal with this. And black has to deal with very carefully to not fall behind. So this is definitely, I think, for a human player level perspective, this is a better position for you to get into as white. All right, everyone, this is everything I have for you today. I hope you guys can try some of the variations that I talked about out in your games. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to my channel if you haven't. And if you would like to support my work, you can check out my Patreon page, link down in the description. Thank you very much. See you next time.